Hey, welcome to World Mind Hub. Subscribe the channel and press the bell icon for more updates. On June 8, 2025, the world was stunned by a headline that seemed almost unthinkable. Germany halts all car exports to the United States. It was a move no one truly expected, a total immediate stop that sent shockwaves through boardrooms and trading floors alike. President Trump's revived America. First trade threats had finally pushed Germany, backed by the full weight of the European Union, to the breaking point. The standoff had escalated beyond rhetoric, turning into a full-blown economic confrontation. Wall Street panicked, the Dow plunged, and auto stocks crashed in a matter of hours, erasing billions in market value and leaving investors scrambling for answers. At ports from Baltimore to Long Beach, ships loaded with BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, and Volkswagens were turned away. Dock workers who had unloaded these cars for years now watched as the vessels idled, uncertain of their next move. The supply chain, once seamless and efficient, froze overnight. Warehouses sat empty, assembly lines halted, and shipping containers stacked up with nowhere to go. The White House was caught off guard. Trump's tariff gambit had backfired spectacularly, leaving his advisors scrambling to contain the fallout and reassure the public. Instead of forcing Germany to negotiate, the U.S. triggered a crisis that severed a $50 billion trade artery. The ripple effects were immediate, with analysts warning of long-term damage to both economies. The silence at the ports became a symbol of a shattered economic relationship. Where there was once constant motion and noise, now there was only uncertainty and loss. For decades, German cars had been a fixture of American roads and dreams, a symbol of engineering, luxury, and aspiration for millions of families. Now, the flow had stopped, and the consequences were immediate. Dealerships faced empty lots, showrooms closed early, and transport trucks sat idle, waiting for shipments that would never arrive. The American consumer was suddenly at the center of a global trade war. Shoppers found fewer choices, higher prices, and a sense of frustration that rippled through communities. The day the German cars stopped coming marked the moment the trade war became real for millions. It was no longer just a headline, it was a disruption to daily life. It was no longer a distant policy debate, it was a shockwave felt in every corner of the country, from bustling cities to quiet small towns. Workers, business owners, and families all faced an uncertain future. The world's fourth largest economy had just drawn a line, and America was standing right on it. The next chapter in this economic standoff was about to unfold, with consequences that would echo for years to come. The shock quickly reached Main Street. At luxury dealerships, managers stared at emptying lots. No new German cars were coming. Inventory became gold. Prices soared as panic buyers scrambled for the last models. Customers who'd saved for years faced disappointment and sticker shock. Deposits were placed on cars still stranded at sea. The joy of buying a new car was replaced by anxiety and frustration. Dealerships, major local employers, faced layoffs as sales and service work dried up. "I have 75 employees," said one manager. A tweet just erased their jobs. The halt exposed how deeply global trade is woven into American life. German cars support American port workers, truckers, salespeople, and mechanics. The sudden stop was a harsh reminder. Trade isn't abstract, it's livelihoods. As lots emptied and sold-out signs appeared, the true cost of the trade war became clear. It was measured in lost jobs, shattered dreams, and uncertain futures. At the heart of the crisis was the America First doctrine. President Trump believed tariffs would force Germany to make concessions and bring jobs back to the U.S. The logic: make German cars expensive, push buyers to American brands, and pressure Germany to negotiate. But this strategy saw trade as a zero-sum game, not a system of mutual benefit. Warnings about supply chain chaos and retaliation were dismissed. The administration underestimated Europe's unity and Germany's resolve. Instead of concessions, the U.S. got a full-blown trade standoff. The tariff threat was seen as an ultimatum, not an invitation to talk. The result: a key ally walked away, and a trade dispute became a diplomatic crisis. America First aimed to project strength, but it triggered a costly backlash. The gamble misread the global landscape, and millions paid the price. Berlin and Brussels responded with cold resolve, not panic. In the face of mounting pressure, their leaders moved swiftly, determined not to show weakness or division. Years of tense talks had led to this breaking point. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as both sides realized that compromise was slipping further out of reach. Germany, with full EU backing, decided no more appeasement. The time for concessions had passed, and a new, firmer stance was adopted. The EU declared U.S. tariffs a violation of international law and a threat to the entire bloc. Officials spoke with one voice, emphasizing the need to defend European interests. Germany wasn't acting alone, it had the world's largest trading bloc behind it. The unity of the EU sent a powerful signal to Washington and beyond. The message was unmistakable. A trade war with Germany meant a trade war with all 27 EU states. Any attack on one was an attack on all. Halting car exports was a calculated risk, but submitting to U.S. demands was seen as worse. Factories paused, workers waited, and the cost of resistance was weighed against the price of surrender. By acting first, Germany seized control of the narrative. The headlines reflected a nation determined to shape its own destiny, not be dictated to by foreign powers. The diplomatic fallout was immediate. Phone lines went cold, statements turned hostile. Long-standing relationships were suddenly strained and trust evaporated overnight. The EU prepared retaliatory tariffs on American goods, from motorcycles to bourbon. Every product chosen was symbolic, targeting iconic U.S. industries and sending a message back across the Atlantic. The car embargo was the opening salvo in a serious transatlantic conflict. Trade routes slowed, inspections tightened, and uncertainty rippled through global supply chains. Hopes for a quick settlement vanished. Business leaders braced for prolonged disruption, realizing that normalcy might not return for months or even years. The world watched as a trade dispute escalated into a prolonged standoff. Newsrooms buzzed, analysts speculated, and ordinary citizens wondered how far the crisis would go. The EU's unity turned a U.S.-Germany spat into a global economic crisis. Markets tumbled, investors panicked, and the ripple effects were felt on every continent. The stakes had never been higher for both sides. With so much on the line, the world held its breath, waiting to see who would blink first. The trade war's impact rippled far beyond car dealerships, touching every link in the economic chain. At the port of Baltimore, longshoremen lost work overnight as ships stopped coming and containers sat untouched. Trucking companies saw contracts vanish, leaving truckers with nowhere to haul and fleets sitting idle. U.S. factories assembling German cars like BMW in South Carolina and VW in Tennessee faced shutdowns as parts from Germany stopped arriving, halting production lines and stalling local economies. Thousands of American jobs were suddenly at risk, with workers uncertain about their future and communities bracing for layoffs. The pain spread to the heartland. The EU's retaliatory tariffs targeted U.S. farm exports, hitting rural America hard. American soybeans and corn became more expensive in Europe, pushing buyers to Brazil and Argentina, and leaving U.S. harvests piling up unsold. Prices collapsed for struggling farmers, forcing some to consider selling their land or taking on debt just to survive. The crisis revealed how interconnected trade really is. One disruption sent shockwaves through countless industries. A small Ohio business making bolts for BMW, a diner near a VW plant, a soybean farmer in Illinois, all were hit, showing how even the smallest businesses felt the strain. The embargo exposed the fragility of the system, revealing just how quickly supply chains can unravel. One political decision triggered a chain reaction of economic pain, with consequences that reached far beyond the negotiating table. The trade war was never just about cars, it was about entire communities, families, and livelihoods across the nation. The shockwaves reached every corner of the American economy, reminding us how deeply connected our lives are to global trade. Behind the headlines, the real story was human. Sarah Jenkins, a car detailer in Austin, saw her hours cut and feared for her kids' future. Frank Miller, who ran a German auto repair shop in Denver, faced soaring parts prices and angry customers. Local media, relying on car dealership ads, lost revenue and laid off staff. The pain was everywhere. Jobs lost, businesses shuttered, families struggling. The trade war silenced local voices and weakened communities. For many, politics was distant, the crisis was personal. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about survival. The victims weren't policymakers, but everyday Americans. Their stories showed the true cost of a high-stakes political gamble. The trade war's casualties had names, families, and dreams. They were the forgotten faces in a global conflict. The U.S.-Germany trade war sent shockwaves worldwide. In Asia, Japan and South Korea worried they'd be next, as their economies rely on exports. Stock markets tumbled, uncertainty reigned. Japanese and Korean carmakers eyed the U.S. market but feared becoming new targets. Asian suppliers lost orders as German factories cut production. The pain spread to tourism. German visitors and executives stopped coming to the U.S., hurting hotels and restaurants. In South America, Brazil and Argentina saw opportunity as the EU looked for new farm suppliers. But aligning with the EU risked angering the U.S. The crisis forced countries to reconsider alliances and trade strategies. The world economy became more fragile, more divided. The trade war redrew the map of winners and losers. Global supply chains unraveled, and uncertainty became the new normal. The fallout was global, not just transatlantic. America first promised to bring manufacturing home. But building a German-style auto industry in the U.S. is no simple task. New factories cost billions and take years to build. The German auto sector relies on a dense network of specialized suppliers, the middle stand, impossible to replicate quickly. Higher costs would mean pricier cars for Americans. Environmental standards could be weakened to speed up production, risking more pollution. The U.S. also lacks Germany's skilled workforce and vocational training. Even with new factories, finding enough qualified workers would be a huge challenge. Manufacturing independence is a long, costly road, not a quick fix. The dream of building it all is far more complicated than a campaign slogan. The reality? There's no easy substitute for global integration. As the standoff dragged on, quiet diplomacy began behind the scenes. Both sides knew a prolonged trade war would be catastrophic. Proposals emerged. The U.S. would drop tariff threats, the EU would cancel retaliation, and German cars would return. A cooling-off period and new trade talks were floated. The goal: let both sides save face and restart negotiations. Business leaders on both sides pressured governments to end the conflict. They reminded politicians that real jobs and real communities were at stake. The crisis forced a moment of reflection about the dangers of protectionism. The future depends on whether leaders can move beyond confrontation. Economic strength in the 21st century is built on bridges, not walls. Recovery will require compromise, patience, and renewed partnership. The shock may have been a wake-up call for a fragile global order. There's a glimmer of hope if leaders choose cooperation over conflict.